Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, FPL Consult here, and in today's video we have my Game Week 11 transfer tips where I speak about some of the more popular players you guys have asked me to speak about over on Instagram and also in the YouTube comments of earlier videos this week. So if you guys do enjoy today's video, please do drop a like, please do subscribe as well, and let's get on with the video. So the first player I want to speak about today is Aina. He has already seen 227k transfers in so far, so I thought I'd lay out a couple of facts first. Now, Nottingham Forest is a much improved side this season. Our perspectives on them have definitely changed after we've seen a couple of the performances this season in earlier game weeks. Now, they did have a slightly easier run of fixtures in which they kept a couple of clean sheets there and also picked up a couple of wins. Later down the line, in more recent game weeks, we did feel as if there were trickier fixtures for them, maybe they would start to struggle a little bit. But that being said, they have somehow managed to continue keeping up a consistent level of performance, both in defense as well as in attack. So they've been scoring really well. Players like Chris Wood have been doing incredibly well, scoring week in, week out. And also defensively, they've kept the second most number of clean sheets in the Premier League so far. So it's no surprise that currently Nottingham Forest are third in the Premier League table, and they are definitely a side to be reckoned with. So 227k people have already moved on Aina after his 15-pointer in Game Week 10, where he scored a goal, got 3 bonus points, and also picked up a clean sheet. So he did really well, of course. People are jumping on this. But I do think as well that the train maybe has left. I think the boat has sailed, basically. Now, in terms of Aina's numbers, he picked up a goal in Game Week 10. Aside from that, he hasn't really had much attacking returns. Overall, in the past 6 game weeks, he's only taken 2 shots and one of them was on target, and that one was the goal. In terms of XG, 0.07 is very low, and expected assist-wise is also 0.37. So overall, not a very attacking defender. So I have to hold my hands up as an Aina owner myself and say that we got pretty lucky for him to get 15 points in Game Week 10. I don't foresee these attacking numbers continuing to be consistent throughout the next few game weeks. That's one. Secondly, I think the fixtures have gone for him, right? It's Newcastle in Game Week 11. In Game Week 12, it's Arsenal away. 13 is Ipswich at home. It's pretty good, but after that, it's Manchester City away and Manchester United away. So I do think like with this run of fixtures coming up, now is definitely not the time to be buying Aina. And for myself as well, I am thinking of selling him sooner rather than later. So I don't think that transferring him in now is a good idea. I do kind of disagree with the 227k people who have already moved for him. If I had a choice to move for defenders this week, I don't even think Aina would be in consideration. There are other kind of defensive assets I would look at, like Nuri, for example, Diogo Dalot, which we'll speak about later on in this video. Just that I wouldn't kind of look at the Nottingham fixtures and think that, there are clean sheets moving forward for them, right? So I do think the kind of boat has sailed for Aina. I wouldn't be transferring him in if I was looking for a defender this week. So next up is Solanke, a player who has already seen 181k transfers in so far, and I feel like he would not have been in today's video if not for the last 15 minutes of Tottenham's game against Aston Villa, where he picked up 2 goals and got an assist as well. So you will remember in the 3 games before that, he racked up 0.21 expected goals in 3 games. And thereafter, a lot of people felt like he was not getting in those positions that we want to see him in. He was not getting the chances, and then sold him. And then obviously in Game Week 10, in typical FPL fashion, he hauled with a 16-pointer. So in terms of the reason why I think it happened, I think it was largely down to a tactical shift, and it's also the main point I want to bring out today if you are buying Solanke or you're considering it. I think the role that he plays largely depends on the kind of midfield structure that Ange Postecoglou goes for. Now, the main change here that we saw was James Maddison not starting and Pape Matar Sarr coming in, who is someone that has slightly more physicality and someone who is better able to kind of hold that position in midfield, someone who is less kind of attacking minded, but someone who gives more control. And that's why I feel like in that game, Solanke did not have to drop that deep to kind of link up the play, because Pape Matar Sarr was always there to kind of hold that midfield position, and Kulusevski, obviously playing in the role that he's been playing this whole season so far, was sufficient enough for Solanke to continue being in rather more advanced positions as compared to the last few game weeks, and that obviously saw him pick up a good number of shots in that particular game and pick up a good number of expected goals as well, leading to the 2 goals that he scored. The assist, I would say, was rather lucky. He got fouled outside the box and Maddison converted that free kick. But that said, aside from that, the amount of chances he was getting as well as the shots he was pulling off, it did look very promising. So those of you who held on to him, you're obviously thinking right now in game week 11 he has Ipswich at home. You are kind of, in the money right now. But I think in terms of players or FPL managers who don't have Dominic Solanke, would you rush out to go out and buy him like the 181k managers who have already done so? In my position, I don't have Solanke and I don't feel like I'm in a rush to get him as well. In game week 12, he has Manchester City away. Now, looking at the way Manchester City have performed so far, you may think that's a game that Dominic Solanke could score in as well. But I think over the long term, Tottenham's fixtures start to take a turn. Fulham and Bournemouth seems to be fine, but Chelsea onwards, it starts to get slightly tricky for Spurs fixture. So I do think like Solanke feels to me like a bit of a shorter term option. I don't think he's someone that I would hold long term, especially looking at the kind of other options that you can go for in the forward positions. There are lots of cheap forwards that you can buy, and I think in midfield, that is where Spurs have kind of other options that you can choose to cover the Spurs attack, such as Brennan Johnson, who is cheaper, and then there's Heung-min Son, slightly more expensive, but he also offers penalties. So there are other ways that you can cover the Spurs attack aside from going for Solanke. But that said, for those of you who do want to move for him, it is not the worst move in the world as well. It's just not something I would feel is super urgent. And also, just the point that I mentioned earlier, that you would be largely dependent on the kind of formation in midfield that Ange Postecoglou goes for, which will then determine Solanke's role and therefore the number of chances he gets in a particular game. So that could obviously change moving forward. I don't foresee Maddison being someone that misses out every single game or someone that they're going to keep out of the squad for very long. I do think like sooner rather than later Maddison will come back into the team, especially with kind of rotations in mind and Spurs involvement in Europe. That could obviously be the case against slightly easier opposition. So I do think like moving forward, that is something that you will have to keep in mind if you do buy into Dominic Solanke now in game week 11. So next up, it's Erling Haaland, who has already seen 270k transfers out so far. And the reason why today's video is kind of one day late, I usually release it on Tuesday, is because I wanted to see the Man City game against Sporting Lisbon and also see a couple of other factors such as their performance and also the minutes that other players were getting within the Man City squad. So we will speak about other players from Man City in this video as well. Rico Lewis later down the line, we will mention him. But specifically for Erling Haaland, he missed the penalty yesterday against Sporting Lisbon. Man City obviously lost that game quite heavily, 4-1. So looking at their performance right now, and also you kind of parallel that with Liverpool absolutely demolishing Bayern Leverkusen at Anfield by 4-0, you start to think as well that maybe you would even go so far as to sell Erling Haaland for a hit just to bring Mo Salah in, because it's looking like Haaland is out of form and Salah is, or Liverpool rather, is super in form. So I do think like it is quite tempting, so I don't have to convince people to transfer him out. I think that is already the narrative going around. But I think for myself, I do have Erling Haaland, and I am also having similar considerations right now, but I kind of wanted to offer the other side of the coin that is making me think about whether maybe I should keep him for one more week. So there's 3 main reasons why I think it is potentially possible to hold on to Erling Haaland for one more week before selling him in game week 12. So against Brighton now in game week 11, firstly, the fixture matchup I feel is a good fixture for him. Now, Brighton are a team that we know are confident of playing out from the back, and the whole of this season they have adopted this kind of a play style, and at home, at the Amex, I don't think they would change that, especially looking at how Man City are performing right now. It does not seem as if they are going to be super afraid or giving Man City too much respect. So I do think like Brighton will continue to keep a similar style of play against Man City, and if that is the case, I do foresee there being space at the back for Erling Haaland to kind of capitalize on and get returns from. So that is one. I think the fixture is good for him. I parallel that to the Aston Villa fixture for Liverpool. Yes, it is at Anfield, but I do think like Aston Villa are a side that are more structured in defense, where they would kind of sit back. They are kind of more solid at the back. I do feel like in terms of XG wise, they are one of the teams that have conceded lesser amount of expected goals conceded. I say this despite them conceding 4 goals against Spurs last week. I still do think Aston Villa defensively are a decent enough side to maybe offer something more than what Brighton would be able to offer against Man City. So that's one, the fixtures. Secondly, I think in terms of expected goals, Erling Haaland has still been continuing to get those chances in the past few games. Now, in the past 3 game weeks, Erling Haaland has still been someone that has racked up the most expected goals, despite him kind of blanking and only scoring 1 goal against Southampton a couple of weeks back. So I still think like the chances are there for him. It's not as if he's not getting the chances, it's more that he's not converting them. And you remember against Bournemouth last week in game week 10, he did have a huge chance to put the ball at the back of the net. He did actually have 3 big chances, but the main one that I'm referring to is the one where he was pretty much a couple of steps out of the goal and he shot the ball and it hit the post. So if that had gone in, I think there would be a different narrative being spun around Erling Haaland right now. So I do think like chances are still there for him. So there is kind of good reason, I guess, in that perspective to still hold on to him for 1 more week at the minimum. And lastly, the last factor I want to speak about is Kevin De Bruyne. Now, last night, he did come on at the 85th minute. He did not start the game. He was in the squad. But recently, Pep has kind of alluded to the fact that Kevin De Bruyne looks much better at this point. He looks more comfortable. He does not feel in much pain. And also in terms of training-wise, he's back in training. So he's in the squad. He got a couple of minutes towards the end of the game yesterday. And I do think like if he does start against Brighton, then obviously with Erling Haaland in the squad and you add Kevin De Bruyne kind of supplying the balls to Erling Haaland, I do think like that could be a game where Man City could kind of kickstart a bit of a resurgence. So I do think like there are different factors, all of this that I've mentioned so far, that make me think maybe it is fine to keep Erling Haaland in Game Week 11 and then reconsider after the Game Week 11 game whether it's worth kind of selling him in Game Week 12 to swap to someone like Salah who has Southampton in Game Week 12. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about in terms of keeping Erling Haaland. But then obviously the other side of the coin, where most of you already know he hasn't been performing very well of late, etc, and therefore maybe you can sell him for Salah. That still stays. So it's a bit of a balance right now where I'm kind of debating whether to keep him or to sell him. Let me know what you guys think in terms of Erling Haaland. Are you keeping him or are you selling him? Obviously, he has seen a huge number of transfers out so far, 270k transfers out, and I do think like he will continue to drop in price, maybe once more before the Game Week 11 deadline, but that is the state of the game right now. So I'd be keen to know what you are doing. I will confirm whether I am selling him or keeping him later on this week in the team selection video. So next up is Trent Alexander-Arnold, who has seen 65k transfers out so far. And I think the main question surrounding Trent is whether to keep him or to sell him. I don't think people will be going out to buy Trent now in Game Week 11, especially when they have Aston Villa at home. So in terms of selling or keeping Trent, I'm in the same position as well, and I'm leaning towards keeping him for a couple of reasons. I think Southampton in Game Week 12 is a game where I see Liverpool keeping a clean sheet in, that's one. And I think in terms of attacking returns, if there's a game that's slightly easier for Trent, one where he can advance slightly further forward than he has done so far this season, I think Southampton is that game for him. So my personal plan is to hold on to Trent for the Aston Villa game as well as the Southampton game, and then reassess whether I want to sell him later down the line, starting with a Man City fixture in Game Week 13. That could be a window to sell him. So for my own situation, I don't intend to sell him. But then again, for those of you who are selling him to kind of free up funds, I can also understand why you would do that, because in terms of attacking returns, it has been very, very thin for Trent. In the past 6 game weeks, he's only picked up 1 attacking return, and that is 1 assist basically. In terms of expected goals, it's 0.21, and expected assist is 1.28 over the past 6 game weeks. So these numbers have really significantly come down from what we were seeing from him last season. So attacking threat has really dwindled for him, and I think in terms of paying 7 million for a player, or defender rather, you cannot really be banking only on the clean sheets that are there for Trent. you kind of need the attacking returns from this defender as well to justify the extra money that you're spending on him. So I can understand why people would be keen on selling Trent to free up money. And in terms of wanting to cover the Liverpool defense as well, there are cheaper options out there such as Konate at 5.3 million that you can very well go for now in game week 11 just to cover the Liverpool defense if you do feel like that is something that you want to cover moving forward. So I do see the appeal. And in fact, in terms of freeing up money to fund moves elsewhere, such as buying a Salah in midfield, for example, or upgrading like a Morgan Rogers to Brennan Johnson, for example, I do think like in terms of a combination move, I would find it more appealing to sell Trent. But in isolation, if you have no other issues elsewhere and your attack is rather kind of settled, I don't see a reason why you need to rush to sell Trent. And it's also the position that I find myself in, where I don't mind just holding him for game week 11. Give him the Aston Villa game, which is not the worst one in the world, because at the end of the day, it is at Anfield, and I don't think it's impossible for Liverpool to keep a clean sheet in that game. And thereafter, the Southampton game is probably the banker. And then game week 13 onwards, you can look to sell him. So I'd probably give him 2 more game weeks if possible. If you are selling him as part of a combination move, then I guess I don't mind it as well. So next up is Alexander-Isak, who has already seen 144k transfers in so far, and he scored in the past 3 games that he's played for Newcastle. So it feels as if he's a player that is coming back into form, and that's why people are wanting to jump onto him. Fixtures moving forward are pretty decent for Newcastle as well. It's Nottingham Forest away, West Ham at home, Crystal Palace away, and Liverpool at home, not the easiest, but that will be at home for them, and then it's Brentford away. So overall, when you look at the fixtures moving forward, also for the longer term, at least until you next need to wildcard, I actually don't mind the Newcastle fixtures. So I think there is, a good reason why you should be considering Alexander-Isak now, but there are a couple of things that kind of put me off. He's at 8.3 million now, so that feels like a bit of a weird price point to go for in terms of forwards, because there are a lot of cheap forwards out there, which is also the main reason why I would be questioning Alexander-Isak as a pick right now. Would you think that Alexander-Isak is able to outscore those kind of cheaper forwards that are on offer right now, like say Chris Wood or even Matthias Cunha, with Wolves having a great run of fixtures? And there's also players like Danny Welbeck who would very well come into the picture from game week 12 onwards. Do you think that over the next few game weeks, Alexander-Isak will outscore these cheaper forwards to the extent where it is worth paying a slightly higher price for him, because he's at 8.3 million? So he obviously would then cause you to have to make a couple of sacrifices elsewhere, maybe going for one less premium in midfield. So with all these kind of considered, I do think, like, for myself, I'm not super keen on Alexander-Isak, but I look at the way that he's performing and also Newcastle coming back into form. I do kind of get why people would be moving for him, so I don't mind him as a pick. And I do think, like, moving forward, he will kind of pick up returns here and there. He's that kind of player that I don't think will blank for many game weeks in a row. Newcastle is a team that will just start to take away moving forward, and I think they are on a bit of a resurgence. But that said as well, I feel like their attacking performances of late is nothing compared to what they were last season or even the season before, where attackingly they're a side that we know can score many goals in a game. Like, they feel to me this season as a team that are kind of dwindling down in terms of attacking numbers. So if you put it to me that in the next few game weeks, how many games do I foresee Alexander-Isak bracing or even getting double-digit hauls? I honestly don't think it's that many. So that's kind of the main reasons why I will probably avoid Alexander-Isak for myself. But as I've said, I can understand why some people will be going for him. And if you have the spare cash elsewhere and you don't mind making sacrifices in your midfield, for example, dropping one of the premiums down, then I do think like Alexander-Isak is a possible player that you can go for. Just that for myself, I'm not super keen on him. So next up is Rico Lewis, who has already seen 62k transfers out so far, and I imagine that will continue to rise over the next few days leading up to the Game Week 11 deadline. Now, the situation with Rico Lewis is that in Game Week 10 against Bournemouth, he got a bit of a rest. He did not start the game. Kyle Walker, who magically came back from injury, got put straight into the squad and into the starting 11 so that Rico Lewis could rest. I think the main reason as well is that leading up to the Bournemouth game, Rico Lewis was playing so many minutes and playing full games as well, that there was quite a bit of a risk to continue playing Rico Lewis and keeping up that amount of minutes for him. So I do think like that was a wise move from Pep. He only came on towards the 70th to 80th minute in that game. Now, with that being said, and a bit of a rest for him against Bournemouth, yesterday against Sporting, he played the full 90 minutes. That was a game that obviously Man City lost 4-1. But looking at it now in Game Week 11, where there's Brighton away from Man City and Kyle Walker having a full rest midweek against Sporting, I do think like this is the period of time where we will start to question Rico Lewis's minutes moving forward. Like Kyle Walker is back now. There's Champions League happening in midweek, and also with the kind of fixture crunch for the schedule moving forward, I do think in the next few game weeks I will continue to start questioning whether Rico Lewis is going to start or not. So I think that is slightly different from the weeks before, where it was fine to keep Rico Lewis because Kyle Walker was out and there pretty much wasn't a replacement for him. But now I think we start to question, and also given that the fixtures moving forward for Man City are really not ideal, and you add the fact that they have not been keeping clean sheets as well, and in terms of attacking returns, it's not as if Rico Lewis has been tearing it up. It's only been one attacking return in the past 6 game weeks. I do think like now is a good time to sell Rico Lewis. He's not a must to sell, but I think if you are in a position where you need to start him and you don't have any other kind of defenders to play, and you're relying on Rico Lewis to start, I would probably lean towards selling him for free. So next up is Diogo Dalot, who gives me a good entry point to speak about Manchester United assets just before their run of 3 good games. It's Leicester, Ipswich and Everton. So over the next 3 game weeks, they are the team with the best set of fixtures. But then also you look at the 3 games after that, it's Arsenal away, it's Nottingham Forest at home, and then it's Man City in game week 16 as well. So it's quite tricky, I guess, if you're moving from Manchester United assets, because you need to account for the fact that 3 game weeks after the kind of Everton game, those are difficult games for them. So I would cater for a bit of rotation if I actually go for Manchester United assets, but that said, I want to spend a bit of time to talk about them as a team overall. And I think in terms of Amorim coming in, a huge factor will be the formation as well as the kind of structure that he goes with moving forward for the team. Now, the Leicester game would still be Van Nistelrooy, who is going to be in charge of the team, but from the Ipswich game onwards, it will be Amorim who's coming in and probably going to enforce his bit of philosophy as well into the Manchester United squad, which is, I guess, what all good coaches kind of do, where usually you would stick to your own philosophy and what you want to play with. A good example of this is Ange Postecoglou, who has really stuck with his kind of thinking and playing style, and Spurs have really kind of adapted very well to it. I do foresee that Amorim is going to come in a similar fashion and try to adopt that 3 at the back formation that he's been doing and seen so much success with Sporting in the Portuguese league. So I do think like he will be playing a 3 at the back, and that is the talk going around right now. So if that is the case, I do start to question also where Diogo Dalot's spot comes in. He can very well fill in as a wing back, but I do think as well that his minutes are not guaranteed by any means. There's also talk of Garnacho, who's someone that we'll spend a bit of time speaking about towards the end of this video. But Garnacho could also be somewhat of a wing-back, even though I don't foresee him being used as a wing-back in games where they need a bit more defensive coverage. Say, for example, Arsenal, I don't think that's a game that Garnacho is going to play wing-back in. Maybe Dalot is preferred in that position. But you get the point that I'm saying there. I think Dalot's minutes moving forward in that kind of a formation may not be guaranteed, but that said, if he does happen to play in the wing-back position for the Ipswich and Everton game, which is when Amorim will be coming in, then I do actually foresee some attacking returns for Diogo Dalot. Now, you would remember that he missed a bit of a sitter in the past few game weeks, but that being said, he puts himself in those positions, and in the past few seasons, we have seen him as a player that is not afraid to get forward, put crosses into the box or get attacking returns. So he's fully capable of that, and with the fixtures moving forward being Leicester, Ipswich and Everton, Manchester United are actually only second to Liverpool in terms of clean sheets kept this season. So I think they are definitely a squad and a defense that can keep these kind of opposition over the next 3 game weeks out. So I don't mind Diogo Dalot as a pick, and in terms of Rico Lewis replacements, I would put him up there as one of the best ones I would be considering. Aït-Nouri is definitely another one I'll be looking at in terms of Rico Lewis replacements, but that said as well, there's always that looming factor of 4 yellow cards for Aït-Nouri. And also the fact that Wolves defensively, I think, are a much weaker side as compared to Manchester United. And I don't think moving forward, Wolves are going to get as many clean sheets. So I think there's a good case for Diogo Dalot. And again, he'll be one of my main replacements for Rico Lewis if I was to sell him. Now that said, I do want to spend a bit of time now that we're reaching the end of the video to speak about the other United assets that maybe some of you guys are interested in as well, which is Garnacho and Bruno Fernandes. So I think both of them are getting a lot of talk right now because we do expect that moving forward with a bit of new manager bounce as well, that potentially Manchester United will be scoring a couple more goals against the opposition we see moving forward. What I would say is, firstly, I don't think investing in attacking assets is as safe as investing in defensive assets, because I think this season so far we've already seen them keep clean sheets. For them to continue keeping clean sheets against the opposition moving forward, I don't think it's too difficult. But for them to just suddenly pick up so many goals over the next few game weeks, I don't think it's as likely. Now that said as well, it is not impossible. So players like Bruno Fernandes and Garnacho are obviously the main ones that people are considering if you're going for Manchester United attackers. So that said, Garnacho is kind of cheaper. He's at about 6.5 million. So I do think like Garnacho is at a price point that is less investment or less risk in going for him. You wouldn't mind him blanking if he happens to do so, because you wouldn't have sacrificed too much in terms of team value just to go for someone like Garnacho. He's a player that you can very well reach if you have a bit of money in the bank and sell Morgan Rogers, for example. You could sell him for Garnacho to get these 3 good fixtures moving forward. You wouldn't have sacrificed too much. But you compare it to Bruno Fernandes, who is kind of more expensive. He's at 8.3 million now. I do think like you would have been sacrificing something elsewhere just to get Bruno Fernandes. So I do think like if you are able to kind of sit with that and you're alright with making a sacrifice just to go for Bruno Fernandes, because you back the fact that moving forward Manchester United will get good attacking returns across the next 3 game weeks, then fair enough. But the same point still stands in terms of Manchester United, where there is quite a bit of uncertainty in terms of the formation they would play, and thereafter the roles that these players would adopt, whether it's Dalot now in this graphic, or Bruno Fernandes, or even Garnacho. Is Garnacho going to play as a wing back? Is Bruno Fernandes going to play as part of the 2 just behind the striker? So I do think like there's going to be different kind of roles that these players are playing that we don't really know or have full information of. The only thing we can be certain of is the fixtures that are good for them in the next 3 game weeks. And that is all. So there is a risk moving for Manchester United assets. I think by no means is it clear cut, but I do think as well that there is, I guess, a bit of a differential if you go for them, that if they do pop off, you would be early on the train as well. So I guess with FPL, sometimes you have to take a bit of a gamble, and I don't mind if you guys are favoring this bit of a kind of new manager bounce for United and going for their assets. But that said, as I mentioned at the start, there will be tricky fixtures for them moving forward, like Arsenal, and I think in fact Nottingham Forest is quite a tricky fixture for them. And then there's Man City in Gameweek 16 that you need to account for in terms of rotation, whether you buy the defensive assets or the attacking assets. So I'll leave it at that. Anything else that comes up during the week, I will cover in later videos, especially the team selection that will be out soon. But if not, I hope you found today's video useful. If you did, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe as well. We are on the road to 10k subscribers, and we are also doing a charity drive where if you guys just hit the subscribe button, I will be donating 20 pence more to Mindset Charity, which is a charity for mental health, something that is close to my heart and something that we want to contribute towards. So all you have to do is hit the subscribe button. If not, I will see you in more Game Week 11 content coming very soon. Bye bye.